So I was watching City Prepping, a recent video that was uploaded titled Railroad Strike 2022 City Prepping News. And I was going through, and as I was watching, I was actually kind of listening to it, which I think a lot of folks are doing now. They're listening more to these videos in a podcast style and getting the news updates, understanding what's going on out in the world, getting financial updates, market updates, prepping information, preparing for whatever could be coming, and just educating themselves more and more by listening to these videos, to these uploads published by channels like City Prepping and Jeremiah Babe and myself, Kevin, which ironically, I was kind of caught off guard because I kept getting messages saying that JB shouted me out. And you guys already know, if you watched my previous video, that Jeremiah Babe actually mentioned me in one of his videos the other night. But before that, I kept thinking, like, why is Joe Biden shouting me out? I thought JB, I didn't connect the dots immediately. That's just a mistake on my part. I thought JB like saw my railroad strike update videos and was like calling me out or something. I don't know. But I was reading the comments here on City Prepping, and one of them really caught my attention. I'm going to read it to you. And it says, I just left an industry where they pumped and dumped employees, constantly making us redundant and then hiring us back on worse terms and conditions. I completely appreciate why so many industries are planning strikes in the coming 12 months. Corporations are becoming so effective at driving down costs that they are literally destroying the livelihoods of the people in the economy that need to live well and spend money in order to keep the economy thriving. I think it was Henry Ford who justified the high wages he paid to his employees by explaining that workers need good pay so that they can buy his cars. If you look at human history on the scale of centuries and civilizations, it's frequently a tragic tale of wealth being sucked upward until it reaches a point where the majority of society cannot function within the economic rules of that society. And then the society collapses or revolts. Economies need to share the wealth because gold bars in the safe deposit boxes of the 1% does not make society affluent or functional. Thank you for your frequent coverage of the challenges we are all facing. This is very important because it kind of circles back to the situation that we are currently in or were in with the Railroad Workers Union potential strike. And the reason why this is so important is for the fact that more and more unions out there are demanding more and more respect. They're demanding more and more in wages. They're demanding more and more in quality of life, in time off, in vacation time, in working to live versus living to work, which is probably not so much in the unions, but in just non-union type work. We're going to see more instances of folks quietly quitting, basically just Marshawn lynching it, only showing up so they don't get fired. And similar to what I was explaining to you guys in that Home Depot video a couple weeks ago. But with the unions, here's the problem. We theoretically avoided a disaster after the President Biden's presidential emergency board and Congress or whomever was involved in these negotiations spent countless hours hashing things out to prevent a railroad strike. And if you watch Economic Prepper, he actually discussed this on his video, and it was almost like a movie. It was like a Mission Impossible. And I equated this and whoever finally figured this out to Ethan Hunt and basically coming in with 4 seconds left before the bomb explodes and diffusing it, which basically this is what was going on. But it didn't quite happen that way. And I guess in a sense, it is really like Mission Impossible because there will be another sequel or another installment to the series because it stopped that bomb from going off. But there's so many other bombs that I guess I shouldn't say bomb too many times because the algorithm may peg this video as not suitable for audiences, but there's more. There are more catastrophes. There are more instances or more events that are bound to occur after this. This is not it. This does not solve the problem. This is not the end all be all. And here's the big problem that I see. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong. Share your opinion in the comments. I really would appreciate it. But the problem that I see is that this particular strike had the potential to pretty much kneecap the entire country. And we knew all along that there was a component there of the U.S. government having the ability to step in to prevent that from happening, which in a sense they did. But what about the unions that don't have that ability? The unions that can legally go on strike if they so choose, that maybe not one on its own would kneecap our economy and our supply chain to the severity that the railroad could or would have, but could still hurt. And other unions following suit that then, as they collectively start causing their own disruptions independently, they become a big problem. And, if what we see here happening proves to them that they can threaten strike or even engage in strike to get what they want, not saying that they don't deserve it, but maybe what they want and what they're asking for and what they're demanding is unreasonable. But if we have enough that are willing to do it, if we have enough that are willing to initiate the threat and potentially follow through with it without any form of resistance or contingency plan or intervention from a stronger power, then we could be on track for some serious meltdowns, although small and minor on their own, as they collectively start compounding the pain, we'll start to feel it more. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But, we are in an age of trend, and we've seen trends grow quickly and spread like wildfire. And this could be a growing trend. Hopefully not, but just putting it out there as it just becomes more and more clear, the mindset of folks out there, regardless of their position in the workforce. We're seeing an evolution in our economy, no doubt. And I want to share this. I want to share this video with you guys. I was watching Clear Value Tax, and he really had me thinking about the future of the workforce. Let me get this pulled up. He had a really interesting story. A lot of you guys may have seen this video already. You may have seen this and you may have heard this already. And you also may have experienced it. So let's check this out.
I want to tell you about this new trend at work. It's called quiet quitting. So quiet quitting, it's not about quitting your job. It's about refusing to go above and beyond at work. It's about setting your workplace boundaries. Now, I pulled this clip from TikTok, and I think it's a very good summary of quiet quitting. So please take a look.
Quiet quitting is essentially employee disengagement, where workers stop going above and beyond what's asked, stop completing tasks and projects without compensation, and stop overly participating in workplace hustle culture. The trend has been triggered by widespread employee burnout, the Great Resignation, and new workplace policies following the COVID-19 pandemic.
So yeah, let me know if you're experiencing workplace burnout, especially now. And we know how the job market is in actuality. We know how the job market is being portrayed by the media, by government reports and statistics and data. But let me know if you're experiencing workplace burnout. Comment below.
Now, I want to give you my reaction. She said that this trend has been triggered by employee burnouts, the Great Resignation, and new policies at work after COVID. First, I don't believe that this is a new trend. A trend, that's something that comes and goes within a short period of time. It could be a few months, it could be a few years. Essentially, quiet quitting is employee disengagement. It's about employees not being motivated, right? So from my perspective, what we're seeing today with quiet quitting, it's nothing new.
And I would agree. It's just that now there's a new term, much like prepping. Let's just say much like prepping. I don't know when the term prepping actually became mainstream, but there was a time several decades, hundreds of years ago that people prepared in general. That's what they did. They didn't really put a name to it or a slogan to it or a catchphrase or anything like that. It's just what they did. And people have been quiet quitting for years. It's just been going by other names.
I'm going to give you some more information about quiet quitting, and then I'm going to share with you my opinions and my experience with quiet quitting. So I think most people get it. People understand the situation. When you work for a company, the company wants to maximize their profits. This involves squeezing the maximum output from the employees and paying the employees as little as possible. This is called, well, the company, they would call this capitalism. The employee, so from the employee's perspective, they ideally want to receive the maximum amount of pay and they want to do the least amount of work. From the employee's perspective, they call this fair. So I'm just keeping it real. This is how it is.
So this is a huge imbalance between the employee and the employer. Now, the catch is for the employee that wants to do the most amount of work for the compensation, and then the employer kind of hits on them. That's where we have a rub.
So basically, here's the situation. Many companies are trying to milk their employees and they're trying to maximize their profits.
And we saw this with the railroad workers, the union workers, basically the two-man crews for these BNSF, Warren Buffett's BNSF, Berkshire Hathaway's freight railway company, Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, CSX. They were milking them. They implemented this PSR, they implemented high vis, and they ultimately cut the crews down. And I even heard that they were trying to cut the crew down to just one and continuously push and push and push, maximum hours, minimum time off, and they would just further increase their profits at the expense of the employees.
Some employees are not okay with this and they're rebelling by quiet quitting. ResumeBuilder.com surveyed 1,000 working Americans in August. 74% of respondents said that they go above and beyond their job description. 21% of respondents said that they are quiet quitting and only doing the bare minimum amount of work. So 21%. So I hope that gives you a sense of how prevalent that this is. 22% of men and 20% of women said that they are quiet quitting. I'm going to give you my opinion in just a minute. However, I want you to know that this is what the employees are saying. These are what the quiet quitters are saying. They're saying these types of things. They're saying that they don't want to overwork themselves because it could lead to burnouts. Going above and beyond at work could compromise their mental health. Work-life balance is a priority, and your work should not define you. And you should focus your time and energy on things that you do outside of work.
Yeah, so the work-life balance line has been crossed drastically. I've seen TikToks of employees voicing their opinions and their frustrations and dislikes towards not even having the ability to actually take a break, because even though they're on break, on lunch, or whatever it may be, because they're within their time of their shift, it's almost like they're expected to always be working and never even getting the legal break allowed to them. And it goes beyond that for folks that are working after hours, working before hours. It's almost like, yeah, sure, you need to come in from 9 to 5, but we expect you to answer your phone 24 hours a day. We expect you to respond to emails instantaneously. Yeah, I know you're on vacation, but did you get that email?
Now, this is where I give you my opinion. About 12 years ago, I was a quiet quitter. Let me tell you my experience and let me share with you what I found out and what I realized. So I was working a corporate job at a Fortune 100 company, so I hated that place. I was miserable. The workplace, it was a very toxic environment. It was so bad that a fist fight, it broke out in the office 2 times when I was there. And one time it involved a grandma. So I can't even make this stuff up. So the commute was awful. Management, they treated you like garbage, but you had to force a smile or you had to pretend to be interested in what they were saying. Subjective performance reviews, at the end of the day, I just dreaded just going into the office,
I know so many people who have the same feeling right now and wish that they could break free, or wish they had the courage to step out. And ultimately, they're bound. They're They're locked in. They're controlled. Their life is in control by their job, by their employer, by this manager. You have to pretend to like and laugh at their jokes. Otherwise, you'll face the consequences.
Now, I put up with this torture because I was young and naive. I thought that if you work hard and you do what's best for the company, then the company, you can rely on them to take care of you, to reward you properly. Well, 1 year goes by. It's time for my performance review. I'm like, hopefully I get a big raise. So they call me in and they say, Brian, you're doing such a good job. You are such an asset to this company. So that's how the conversation starts. I think, wow, this conversation's off to a really good start. Like, I like where this is headed. And then they tell me, but as you know, we're going through a recession. However, you're such an asset to this company. You're doing so good, so we're going to be generous to you. We're going to give you a 2% raise. Congratulations. Keep up the good work. When I heard that, I was in disbelief. Like, I was in shock. I was like, you guys cannot be serious. So I busted my ass off for the whole year for a lousy 2% raise. Now, I thought immediately I would have been better off if I was just slacking off, just doing the bare minimum, and I would have been okay with a 1% or a 0% raise.
How many folks out there got shafted, by their employer, by management, by a metric, by, a box that was left unchecked, by a performance review that scored, 1 point off from getting the max?
So anyways, from my perspective, my thought process as an employee in that situation was all this hard work that I did for the company, going above and beyond, just being such a good employee, it didn't pay off. It wasn't worth it to me because it's a 2% raise. Like, give me a break. Anyways, immediately after that happened, I decided to quiet quits. But in my days, we just called it slacking off.
And that's what I was saying. People have been doing this for years. It's just now it has a mainstream trending title, keyword of quiet quitting.
So this is what I did. I told myself that I need to get out of here. I need to get out of this job. So I decided that I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to start my own tax practice. But I was recently out of college and I had no money.
Which is pretty typical, pretty common. And, although President Biden initiated a student loan forgiveness program, it's like not even a drop in the bucket for the amount of debt that most students carry coming out of college.
I decided that I tried to get clever. I decided to slack off at work. So I'm going to slack off at work. I'm going to collect a paycheck and I'm going to start building my tax practice on the side. So I decided to do the bare minimum amount of work, just enough to get by at work and not get fired.
So he just described a side hustle, plain and simple. Now, I've talked to you guys about this many times in the past. Now, his explanation of what he decided to pursue is relatively intensive. It's an active income stream versus a passive income stream, which ultimately down the road, which probably now at this point at this stage in his life and his career, it probably could be a passive income stream. But at the end of the day, he had a job, he had a career, and he started working on something else through a side hustle.
Now, you were expected to get into the office around 8:30 a.m. and people are usually leaving around 5:30 p.m. So that was the norm. So I thought, that doesn't work for me. I'm trying to build a business here. So I rolled into the office typically around 9:30 a.m., a little bit late. I'd leave a little bit early at 4:30 p.m. Now, when it was lunchtime, people would take like a 20 or 30 minute lunch break. They would go to lunch around like 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. I took the full 2 hours. I would take 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. as my lunch break. Now, this
What a savage.
my behavior when I decided to quiet quit. Like, I really didn't care. Like, I stopped caring. There's pros and cons to this, and we're going to get into that. But here's the thing. I'm not lazy at all. I am not a lazy person. In fact, I'm a very hardworking person. Like, I was using my lunch breaks to work on emails with my clients or potential clients, and I would be using my lunch breaks and leaving early so that I can meet with new clients or pick up business.
Smart.
Now, I want to tell you this. So this is a little bit of advice, some recommendations, but this is coming from personal experience. As soon as you quiet quit, your boss or your bosses, they're going to catch on pretty quickly. If you're going to quiet quits, I would recommend that it be a gradual progression, so a gradual process. Like, I didn't jump into 2-hour lunch breaks immediately. Like, I had to work my way up there.
Solid advice.
You start showing up to work a little bit late, you start leaving a little bit earlier, and then you get a little bit more bold, just a little bit, it's a gradual process, little by little, bolder and bolder as time goes on.
It reminds me of that movie, Office Space.
Because if you're too bold, just right from the get-go, it might be too much of a shock to management, and then you might be at risk of getting fired immediately. Now, here's what happened to me. After 1 year went by, like, I'm surprised it even dragged out that long. My bosses, they had enough. They told me, Brian, we noticed that you're away from your cube a lot. You know, they warned me. They said that if you get 3 strikes, then you're going to be fired, and this is your first strike.
I want you guys to pay close attention to what he says throughout this 3-strike process, because this is a part of the problem that the workforce, that the typical corporate lifestyle employers have, which basically breaks down the morale and the want and desire for employees to devote their lives to the success of these companies that they work for, and ultimately forces them out and pushes them onto bigger and better things, creating their own companies. And pay attention.
I disagreed because the way I saw it, I was getting my job done. Like, I was providing and doing what they told me to do. I just wasn't going above and beyond. You know, again, I didn't want to, because for what? A 2% raise? It just wasn't worth it to me. So after that first strike, do you know what I decided to change? Absolutely nothing. I was quiet quitting. Okay, so I got my first strike, and a few weeks later, not even a month passes by, just a few weeks later, my boss tells me, Brian, we need to have another talk. I mean, I know what my boss is gonna say. My boss tells me that I'm getting a second strike, and my boss literally tells me that I need to get with the program.
Oh boy. Get with the program. It's like get in line. You know, it's like mindless. You're trapped in the matrix. Like you're a sheep in, just being herded, in this direction. Don't think, don't do anything besides what we tell you to do. Stay in your box. Be here from this hour to this hour. Don't be anything more than what we want you to be, because we want you to be great. We want you to tell you you're doing a great job. But we also want to tell you that time's tough, and we only have enough to give you a 2% raise. I know it doesn't even come close to inflation, but you're doing a great job.
So you know what I did? I went to my cubicle. I picked up my personal items, just a handful of things. I went straight to my car. I drove off. I never came back. One of the best decisions of my life. So I don't believe in 2-week notices. I didn't even give a 2-second notice. I just left. Now, I want to say this to all the quiet quitters. This is very important for me to say this to you. And it's also very important that you hear this.
I think the cool part about this is that Clear Value Tax typically brings news updates and stimulus check updates and child tax credit updates and things like that. And this video here is I don't know, to me it feels like a personal view into him in his life. And just for some reason this video resonated with me. Not because I quiet quitted, but because I did end up leaving my job, and I didn't not give a 2-week notice. I actually gave a 30-day notice. But this resonated with me because the whole get with the program and, you're not in your cube, it didn't really work for me.
This is kind of, again, from my experience. I cannot promise that you're going to have a happy outcome like I did. I'm very fortunate on how things worked out for me.
Very, very true statement. He is very fortunate. I'm not going to say it's luck. I'm going to say he worked really hard for what he's achieved. But you got to realize that quiet quitting could backfire on you, and walking out could hurt you. So you got to keep these things in mind.
I just want you to know that I understand your situation. I know how you feel. I've been there. So trust me, believe me, I know. So with that being said, and you knowing where I'm coming from, I want to give you some advice. If the economy gets worse, I just want you to realize the ramifications, the reality. If the economy gets worse, you're going to be the first one on the chopping block to get fired. So I don't know how important that is to you or not. I mean, to me, that wasn't important, but maybe to you it would be. It would be.
That is extremely important, and why this video makes so much sense with the comment that I read to you guys from City Prepping, and tying it into the possible potential future of more disgruntled employees, more unions demanding higher quality in the work and the compensation for the work that they do, and so on and so on and so on. This is a real possibility that we should all be preparing for.
So I'm just warning you how it is. And here's another thing. If you're quiet quitting, you're not going to be the first pick to get promoted. I think you're clearly aware of that. It's going to be difficult for you to climb up the corporate ladder if that's something you're interested in. If you don't get promoted, then you're not going to get compensated as much as you could or as much as you'd like, in comparison to if you were hustling at work. But that would go against the whole quiet quitting trend, right? So I just want you to have fair warning of the consequences of quiet quitting. These are the trade-offs. These are the realities. On top of all that, on top of everything I just said, I want to tell you this because this is not something that you're going to read about, and nobody's going to tell you this. I'm telling you this out of personal experience. On top of everything I just said, you're going to experience some additional stress and anxiety, like, oh man, I wonder how upset my bosses are at me today because you're quiet quitting. Or will today be the day that I get fired? Because if you think about it, if you're busting your butt off at work, you're working hard. I know that's tiring, but at least you don't have the constant fear or the threats of getting fired.
He's absolutely right. However, the possibility always exists for you to be laid off or furloughed or, let go, not necessarily out of any fault of your own or any negative termination.
So if you find yourself in that position, lack of job security, that can be very stressful. That's something that you should be aware of. So that's fair warning if you decide to quiet quit. All I'm saying is, if you're going to try quiet quitting, if you're going through it right now, just understand the consequences. And I'm telling you that I don't think that quiet quitting is a good long-term solution. If you're going to be working, whether it's for someone else or if you're going to be self-employed, you're going to want to be engaged and interested in whatever it is that you're doing. I think that's very important for, your mental health and for your well-being, just generally. Now, I'm going to end with this. Perhaps the right answer is to find a new company or find a new field or even start your own business. So I'm going to tell you this sounds so cheesy, but it's the truth. Life is too short and you don't want to be spending or wasting 40 hours a week for the majority of your life doing something that you don't want to do or that you're not interested in. You're going to be miserable. So I understand that you have responsibilities, you have financial obligations, but you also have a responsibility to yourself to not be miserable. And if you go through this emo, quiet quitting phase for an extended period of time, you're going to be miserable. So you need to find a solution because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So I used quiet quitting as a stepping stone to realize and to achieve my solution. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for all the support. Please subscribe, and I wish you a very nice day.
And that is a great way to end it. Number one, he's providing exceptional motivation for folks out there looking to find happiness, find their calling, find their purpose, achieve personal goals in the work that they do, but also being 100% honest and real that it could not work out. It could backfire on you. And the big difference here is that he didn't just quiet quit. He was pursuing a side hustle that he was going to end up turning into his profession, his career, his main gig, while still having another job. So he quiet quit that job to keep the income coming in so he could build up his next plan. He was preparing for that. He was preparing to move on, but he's also preparing to get fired, which ultimately didn't happen because he didn't get 3 strikes. He just ended up quitting. But at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about. If you guys caught the live stream that PFS on YT and I did the other day, and it was basically saying, the best decision we ever made was quitting, was because we went forward and pursued things that made us happy and ultimately found ways to make us money. And I recommend that for anyone interested in, if you want to join the group and develop a YouTube channel, I'm gonna tell you right now, do not do it trying to make a channel based off of something that you don't like and you don't enjoy, because it will be no different than his experience working for that Fortune 100 company, except for the fact that you'll be grinding hard with no return until you succeed and possibly succeed, but it'll be harder for you to succeed at something that your heart's not into. But I will say that he chose a great path, not only for the fact that this is what he was studying in college and what he chose his profession to be. But think about it. He went the direction of tax preparation, tax advisor, just tax in general. And think about something that exists today. It existed hundreds of years ago and will continue to exist theoretically for eternity. He's basically recession proof. He's basically union strike proof. He's a smart man. Pay attention.